So we want to maintain your involvement, as we discussed this morning, in the SES, particularly on the training side, and on coming back to you for another conversation on performance reviews once we're a little further along. I think there's continued work on the IT side, but we're going to make that sort of the 10 or 20% of your involvement. We want to ramp up a couple new areas. So I'm on page 30 now, and our thinking was consistent with much of the work we've done, but that the best area to focus at a macro level is on where we can save money and increase efficiency, and do a pretty quick cycle run of getting some private sector best practices in a few areas where we could have significant savings potential in sort of the 6 to 10 month time frame, where we have natural owners, as we did with the last set of topics, at the PMAB level and also here at OMB to help drive the change. And I already mentioned this, but where we do believe that private sector best practices can help accelerate our efforts that we have ongoing. So the three terrains that we wanted to brief you on very quickly, with the goal of either today, if it's obvious, or in a follow-up phone call if we think it needs a little more reflection, choosing two of are real estate, improper payments, which you'll learn more about, and strategic sourcing, which naturally came up a few times in this morning's conversation. So the goal was to pick two new topics, again, divide the group in half, have you assign a senior staff person to work with the team, have some personal involvement along the way, make progress for our June meeting, and really have recommendations for our October meeting. So why don't we do a quick intro, starting with you, Joe?
Hey, I'm Joe Jordan from the Office of Management and Budget, and I am Jeff's senior advisor, and I am also the nominee for the Office of Federal Procurement Policy.
So think of him as contracting, acquisition, worked at McKinsey, and then at SBA for 2.5 years.
I'm Peter Benetti. I'm at the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services. I'm the Deputy Administrator for Program Integrity, so I'm the Medicare and Medicaid fraud fighter.
I'm Danny Werfel. I'm the Controller at OMB, and I have responsibility for broad issues of financial management, fraud, error, real estate, among other responsibilities.
As I've taken on the director role, Danny has stepped up and taken over much of what I was doing on management.
All right, want me to launch into real
Please.
estate then? Okay.
So, team, we have a goal, which I want to meet or exceed of being done by 12:15. So I think you need to have everything on the table by 12. You should ask questions as we go, but let's get the three topics done by 12, and then we will have 10, 15 minutes of conversation and break.
So as Jeff mentioned, real estate is a large opportunity. It's a large footprint. We have the largest real estate inventory in the country. We think maybe the world, but we haven't been able to validate that yet. The operating costs on our real estate is $30 billion. We have over 1 million assets. 1 million different structured assets, and obviously a very diverse portfolio, everything from office buildings to labs to tunnels under the earth that are 300 miles long and we shoot photons through. I mean, we have every type of real estate you can imagine.
That's something you don't find in the private sector.
Yeah, exactly. But we have been mostly focused on what we call our administrative assets, our office space, our warehouses, hospitals, to look for downsizing opportunities. There's a couple of factors at play right now that have raised this opportunity into even a higher possibility for savings. First of all, we're seeing the workforce being a lot more mobile. Not everyone's at their desks the way they used to be, and moving costs are down as well. People, when they move now, show up with a thumb drive rather than a bunch of boxes, and we're seeing that as an opportunity. And then technology is changing. One of the examples we use is we have farmers on tractors throughout the country that are using GPS devices and to do their crops. Yet we still have a bricks and mortar USDA building in almost every county in the United States. So our footprint is a 1960s footprint. The way in which these activities are carrying out are not so.
One of the things that Kathleen talked about with the ag is some tremendous work that they're doing. They are out there closing offices
Yep.
really for the first time ever.
Yep.
So
And what are they doing with the people?
yeah, they're able to, I think, handle most of it through either attrition or giving the people an opportunity that's not right next door, and if they don't want to take the commute piece of it, then. But I mean, the idea of in this day and age, you have offices that in every county staffed by an individual or two.
Yeah, it gets even more challenging because it's not just an office in every county. We have multiple federal agencies that have offices in every county, including Social Security, obviously the post office, et cetera.
All is managed siloed?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, that's
You
right.
see a little bit job training, and there's some one-stops, but for the most part, everybody's managing their.
Yeah, it's very solid. And what we're trying to do for the first time is manage the federal portfolio more effectively. And the next bullet here on the support for agencies sharing assets in the same metro areas. We're at a point right now where we've developed a robust inventory of every asset with a lot of data, and we're doing, let's look at the Denver metro area, let's look at Atlanta, let's see where there might be overlap, because we have information that can allow us to see, connections that can be made among agencies. So we have a lot of different indicators that we look at. The Government Accountability Office, which is like our auditor, has told us that we're over-relying on short-term leases. We have too many unneeded assets. We're not running our assets as efficiently. This is all information we have been able to identify as well, and we've set out to tackle the issue. So the next slide.
Page you on then?
I'm on,
33.
yeah,
2.
I'm on 32. Yeah, let me use this so we're all on the same page. So back in 2010, President Obama issued an executive order telling us to save $3 billion in our real estate portfolio. So far, we've achieved $1.5 billion of that savings. And
Can I interpret the question?
Please.
This is sort of about how the culture works. So when an order like that is issued, does each agency go out and try to figure it out on their own, or does this become a forcing function for working together?
It's a good question. It's a mixture of both, but what happened when that executive order was issued is I created a team of three federal CFOs, and 3 senior real estate officials from across government. And what we did is we brought every agency in and did kind of a stat session of their inventory and said, show me where you think the opportunities are, show me where they're not, and we did a deep dive. And it was through that effort that we got every agency to figure out what their complement of the $3 billion goal is. And we actually are now at $3.5 billion in terms of the trajectory. But it wouldn't have worked effectively if we just let the agencies do it on their own. But you needed both. You need a combination of both.
So Danny, let's say you could wave a magic wand and you just reduced real estate by 30%. You consolidated buildings, people are mobile. What are you going to do with the real estate? I mean, this has got to be the worst market ever to try to deal with the problem. So at the end, is the intent to just sell it off even if it's at a loss, or?
It depends on the asset. A lot of, when you start studying our real estate portfolio, you'll start seeing that a large portion of it doesn't have a market value. And either because it's in a campus or location, and it's just a building that we're maintaining, and demolishing it is the best thing to do to get rid of the operating costs. And that, you'd be surprised at how often we have excess or underutilized assets that we have determined have no market value. We do it all the time, yeah. And that saves us money because of the, but the more direct answer to your question is, yeah, we're gonna sell it.
Have any of you ever been to the Four Seasons here?
Yes.
Georgetown? Prime location. Behind the Four Seasons is 2 acres of a steam heating plant that used to, a decade ago, it stopped, used to provide steam heating to some of the federal buildings. It's been vacant since. So if you go in there, all the labor notices are from 15, 20 years ago.
Why can't we convert that to?
It's $350,000 a year to maintain it. So we spent $3.5 million across a decade. We are working through the process to sell it. It's a hard process, so prior administrations decided just to not fight that battle. Secretary Salazar and I put a stake in the ground that it's being sold. It'll be sold hopefully within the next 6 months or so. We'll get tens of millions of dollars and stop paying the $350,000. And you can imagine there are a lot of people who are interested in 2 acres on the waterfront.
Yeah, that's a great spot.
It is, and there's a lot of interesting elements to the story, and one of them Jeff mentioned, which was it went mothballed 10 years ago, and it was only within the past few months that we announced that we're accessing it. This is a, yeah, well, there you go.
Is this one in Georgetown?
Yeah.
There's 2 acres there?
Right behind, so if Four Seasons is on M,
Yes, that
it's
all
between the Four Seasons and the water.
Wow, incredible.
Wow.
Unbelievable.
You should get a good price for that.
Yeah, and the rooftop views are unbelievable from that location.
Yes.
So it should command a good price. But you're right, in some cases, we're going to be selling into a soft market, but we don't have the luxury in many cases of waiting, given the budget climate we're in, and a lot of pressure from a lot of different congressional stakeholders to move these assets off our books. We've got a couple of different things going on that I'll highlight, but know that there's a tremendous amount of work and capital going into all of this. We are putting together something that doesn't exist right now, a Craigslist for government. We have not solved the problem of, I'm USDA, I'm in Oakland, California, I need 20,000 square foot of warehouse space, I'm just going to go procure it, versus knowing that Commerce, a few blocks over, has some excess capacity. We're trying to network the data in a way to share those relationships. And then the last bullet here on creating an independent process. Why does it take 10 years for us to access the Georgetown property? The politics, the local politics, whether it's the Georgetown Commission on how to redevelop the area, or whether it's the mayor or the council. Throughout the country, we have assets that we can't move on as quickly and swiftly because of the competing stakeholder interests.
Andy, I'm going to call an audible. I just got called into something that I cannot avoid, so I apologize. So what we're going to do is, rather than go through the areas for PMAP guidance in each section,
Yeah.
let's have each individual, and Stephen just get us through this, and then just present for 5 minutes in their area what the challenge and opportunity is. We'll definitely have you out of here by 12:05. I apologize for leaving early. I would only be doing this if I absolutely had to. And then what we'll do is we'll get a 15-20-minute call next week on the calendar where we'll get this group on that call, and we can determine together what our 2 topics are going to be. And again, apologies and gratitude for being here.
The only thing I would say to continue to consider is a lot of great work that we heard this morning. There's going to be some ongoing work that I think we can push that along further.
Totally true. I think that is 20, maybe it's 30%, but I think we can afford to launch a couple more topics, because I think these topics are pretty contained, and you guys have best practices, while we continue to monitor and help on those issues. Again, I apologize. And so 5 minutes per terrain, and then we'll do phone call next week.
Yeah. So just to finish up the bottom line on real estate.
Maybe just a second before you go, just in front of you, it's been pretty amazing to see the progress.
Definitely.
Just from your
Definitely.
leadership, I think we'd be remiss not to acknowledge that, so.
All the credits to you
Thank you.
guys. We've just been facilitating.
Fantastic.
Stephen, as we're talking about, Scott's going to be ramping up an important role. So now let's just keep up the momentum, and thank you for everything. And apologies again, I would only do this if I absolutely had to.
So I think the bottom line on real estate is, and something that we can, as Jeff said, lift up at a later time and delve deeper into, is things are changing, the workforce is changing, technology is changing, even our data warehouses, we walk into them today and you see a lot of empty space because the things that used to have to hold major large computers are now being held on things this big and holding 10 times the amount of data. How do we strategize around that is something we want to collaborate with you on. It's a combination of what is the right activities to get the right return on investment in downsizing. It's also getting the employees culturally and ready for these types of changes as well, because it could change how they come to work, what their office looks like, et cetera. So
It's almost 2 efforts, though. Like, if you're going to start looking at data center consolidation, that's a whole different cadre of people than just looking at people consolidation. I just throw it out there because one has vendor management issues. I mean, at the end, you're still trying to move real estate. But in terms of our expertise, it's probably, you might want to think of it as two different, yeah.
And both are relevant. We're
Yeah.
going after both. So I think, yeah, whichever one there seems like there's a good synergy on, we should delve into it.
But
both.
data center
just to add-
consolidation, data center consolidation has been an effort that the federal government took on at least 2
Yeah,
or 3 years ago.
we're in the middle of it. We haven't hit our final target, but we've reversed the trend on the increase. We were going in the wrong direction.
That's been a pretty active project.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So I would agree. I would think that probably a more timely issue where we're still kind of in the embryonic phase, and to get your leadership and thoughts early on, is this concept of a mobile workforce and how that should change the way federal facilities are utilized.
Try to interrupt.
No, that's exactly what I was going to say. I think we probably gravitate more towards what's the workplace of the future, and that's a strategic issue and how they're going to work, and real estate as a corollary to that, rather than us being necessarily the champions of sort of real estate. At least speaking for myself. And so the data center one we all think about because it's core to how we think of our business. The mobile workforce, all of us I think are grappling with.
That's good feedback. Sticking to Jeff's schedule, let's move to slide 34. So we're in a different area now, off of real estate, now on what we call improper payments, which is a term that Congress established, so we stick with it, but it doesn't necessarily resonate with the public all that often. These are just payments that we make in mistake. They go to the wrong people in the wrong amount for the wrong purpose. Sometimes we make the mistakes because we don't have the right information. Sometimes entities are defrauding us, setting up false identities, and the like. What we've decided is the most important emerging trend and opportunity in this area is leveraging technology and leveraging the information age. We've had some epiphany moments essentially in the last few years. In particular, when the Recovery Act was passed, there was a watchdog entity that was set up, and that watchdog entity brought to the table techniques and tools that were used in counterintelligence to say, can we use these type of algorithms and data analytics to look at more blocking and tackling issue of, should this contractor have gotten funds because they were suspended or debarred or convicted of a fraud at some point? So it's using technology to oversee federal dollars. There's some game-changing things the information age is providing, and what we're learning more and more is that there's a whole source of information out there that's at our fingertips right now through Google and other mechanisms that can make people back in DC smarter about overseeing federal dollars and about building risk management profiles to figure out where those pockets of fraud and error are and where we need to deploy our resources. And again, we're in that embryonic phase. We haven't really figured out how to take and harness all those tools in this way. And
Buzzwords you're hearing in the industry now is called big data, right? And big data isn't that people mistake it with there's lots of data. Big data is actually about the analytics you can do, exactly as you're describing, Danny, to put information together in a way that gives you a meaningful outcome. And so this is a huge new area that we're all focused on.
we're seeing that. So half of our balance sheet on these errors, we've got about $120 billion in error annually. It's a staggering number. It's not fun to have to go up and answer to Congress on why that number is so big. But half of that is at HHS and Medicare and Medicaid. And Peter runs the operation, as he mentioned earlier, at CMS around reducing fraud and error in Medicare and Medicaid, and is one of our thought leaders in the area of fraud detection. So I thought Peter spent a minute or two just kind of talking about your role and what you have going on at HHS.
Sure, Danny. So our challenge in Medicare and Medicaid is to continue to deliver services to beneficiaries and pay bills on time and appropriately, while cracking down on all the sources of improper payments. One major piece of what we've done is to put into place technological solutions on both the screening of the people who want to get into Medicare, the 20,000 or so people who apply to be new providers and suppliers every month in Medicare, to find the bad ones and to find the ones that we're already in, and to screen through the 4.5 million claims a day that we get in Medicare. So we've got those systems up and running. They're in place, and they're integrated with each other as well. And so this is a new day in terms of getting the systems into the 21st century. And there's a lot of aspects of this kind of change in our context that make it very challenging, but we've made a lot of progress. So I'd be happy to answer any questions or talk about this.
I heard you correctly. You said there's $120 billion a year in improper payments.
Yes.
And $60 billion is just in Medicare and Medicaid?
That's correct.
So
Wow.
that's the improper payments, and some chunk of that or some separate number on top of it is fraud. A lot of the improper payments are errors, that failure to document things properly, failure that would turn into proper payments if people change their billing systems. And so not all of that is money that would never go out the door. It's money that's going out the door improperly the way it's being done.
Peter, are you
Just to be
affected by
clear.
the ICD 910 conversion? Is that going to make this even more challenging? Do you want to?
So in a fee-for-service world, everything that you do in medicine has to have a code attached to it, and the coding systems have changed over time, and they keep getting more and more complicated. In the right world, that would help.
Just for background,
Yeah.
in the United States, we're on something called ICD-9. Europe and the rest are on 10. We're converting. 10 has, help me with the numbers here, but 9 has maybe 50 or 70,000 codes, and 10 has 300, 400,000. I mean, I may have the numbers wrong, but orders of magnitude.
Order of magnitude.
Orders of magnitude.
Right.
And the private sector and commercial payers are obviously dealing with exactly what you're dealing with, and I'm just wondering, that's going to be a whole new set of challenges, it would seem to me, on CMS payments.
It's a set of challenges, absolutely right, but it's more detail, and so it could cut to our
Suppose if
benefit.
people
It could-
code right, it will make
If
that
people
easier.
code right, it's more
More
useful.
room for
So
error.
I'm actually a pretty simple guy. When I hear a number that Tim had to clarify, which was 120 billion, I think was the number you said. This feels like this is one that we got to go, just got to go look at. I mean, call me crazy.
And this is,
You're radical, you're just not crazy.
It's also that the problems that we have are the ones that degrade citizen trust in government over and over again. This is where we get most of the stories. Like, we pay dead people. We often pay dead people. We pay prisoners. We pay people that owe debts to the federal government when we should be offsetting those payments. We even go as far as paying people that are listed on an excluded party that have been suspended or debarred. And it's all about not having the right date. It's the volume of transactions that we do in a day. And the fact that in order to be more precise and to not make these mistakes, a lot of data needs to come together seamlessly in an automated way, in a smart way, to inform our payment streams, and we've got a lot of work
To
there.
reinforce the, and we haven't heard the other one, I guess there's the strategic sourcing, but to reinforce your instincts here, this does really lend itself to a lot of help from the private sector, it seems to me, because as I said, commercial payers are dealing with exactly the same set of issues. There's, as you well know, enormous solutions out there for this. So it does really lend itself to the kind of work where I think we can be helpful.
Yeah, I would agree.
If you know that you're doing it, I mean, it'd be one thing if you didn't realize you were doing it, but if you know that you're doing it, you must have some trap on this, or is it by sampling?
We do. We have. Let me kind of explain it to you. Yeah, we do a lot of sampling, but we have a number of different federal agencies with a number of different payment systems, internal control processes systems. We have let's use dead people as an example. We have a death master file. This is a fun topic, right? You've got Social Security has a master file of all the dead people, but it's incomplete and it's not always timely because we rely on states to report that information. So challenge number one, right? Challenge number one, we have a non-timely death master file. Challenge number two, the agencies aren't consistently checking that master file before each payment goes out. So there are hiccups in the internal controls and the timing. And third, and perhaps the most vexing of the challenges, is that many of these programs are run through the states. So the state has to make the determination, for example, of what payment should go to who, and sometimes, let's say it's based on household size. Let's say someone died in the household, and now they have a household of 3 instead of 4. That reduces their overall payment. Someone goes in and audits that payment to see if we made it right or wrong. They say, you paid a household of 4. They only have 3 because you made that payment after someone had died. The states have to be, and there's 50, obviously, different operations managing that. The challenge becomes complex.
Look, at the end of the day, everybody deals with this. It's a classic, this death problem you described is a classic entitlement management problem that everybody deals with in different
Healthcare benefits.
everybody deals with it.
Yeah.
And the challenge is you need some changes from an infrastructure perspective to really make a big impact on this. You can chip away at this and make a little bit of improvement, but you need a big change if you're going to really take this on from the level that it's at to a meaningfully smaller level. And I would ask you to look at, and I was just mentioning it to Shantanu on the walk over, but Brazil has gone to a system where all interaction with the government is actually now digitally signed. It's an incredible system, and I don't know how long it's taken them to put it in place, but now you have the situation. They started it from the IRS, their tax authority, because what they wanted to do is everybody had to submit tax payments, and they had to sign them so you knew who it was, and there was kind of the sense of non-repudiation. And you should look at what they've done, because it's fascinating.
Right, obviously, there's a lot of room for activity here, but building on your point, Enrique, one of our historical perspectives here is that for many, Congress first started requiring us to measure and report on improper payments in 2002. And so it's been a decade. And what we've noticed is that the corrective actions that agencies have put in place over the last decade are things that you don't get too excited about. They're important. They're things like increased training and communication and clarification of what the regulations are, all stuff that needs to be done. But what we have now, we think, is that additional layer to place on top of those corrective actions that are more game-changing. And to us, it really revolves around information, data, and technology to deploy our resources more effectively. I'll turn it over to Joe now. I just want to give one story to kind of sums up where we want to be. So when the Recovery Board was created to oversee the Recovery Act, the following things happened. We were required to put all the information out there on where every payment's going to every recipient, which was very challenging, but we did it. And the Recovery Board built this website, recovery.gov, where using a map of the United States, you can drill down to your street and see if anyone got an award on your street. When we set up hotlines to say, if you see any, you're our fraud detectors, citizens, citizen watchdogs, you help us. So there's a story about an individual calling a hotline and saying, I went on recovery.gov and I see that this thing on my street got a contract. Something's fishy here. You guys should look into it. So 5 or 6 years ago, that would have either been, filed. Who knows if anyone would have followed up on it? And at a minimum, they would have had to send someone out to look at the situation. Instead, today, an examiner sitting at their desk goes on Google Earth, looks at gets a bird's eye view of the location. Turns out this location is a house on the water in Florida with a boat parked out back, and it's listed as a headquarters for a Recovery Act contractor. 20, 30, 40 minutes later, a little machination of the data, we find out that this resident is also the corporate address for 12 other companies that are getting Recovery Act awards. Boom, we know we have a problem. Wow. I wish, this is the challenge, I wish that this was going on across government and that we had operationalized this type of connectivity to our work. Again, this is an isolated example. We're trying to make that more viral around government. Joe, why don't you do strategic
Sure,
sourcing?
thank you. And if you guys like the $120 billion, federal procurement is $535 billion a year. So 1 out of every $6 the government spends in total goes out through a government contract. So there's huge opportunity here. And as we were looking at what some of the specific things heeding Jeff's charge, what can we engage in over a discrete period of time and really move the needle, strategic sourcing rose to the top of the list. The challenge and the opportunity is that federal purchasing is very decentralized. You've got a lot of agencies each with their own contract, or more frequently contracts, all separate with the major vendors. You've also got a wide variation in pricing. So we pulled a real example here where for unlimited data plans in the same city, 3 different agencies were paying hugely different prices. You know, one person's paying $40, one person's paying more than 3x that. So the challenge is, yes, that there's this wide variation. It's also that none of them know what other people are paying. There's very limited price transparency for no statutory or regulatory reason. There's nothing preventing agencies from sharing their pricing. But the flip side of that is, what is the incentive for them to do it as well? There's a fear factor that if I find out you're all getting better prices than me, that will be bad. Where if it comes out that I'm getting the best price, I don't get anything extra for that. So let's all agree not to share. That's not a good system when you're looking at it from the systematic standpoint as opposed to my little corner of the world standpoint. And that's why we think there's a huge opportunity here. And again, a small little change in behavior will have a huge impact. We have done some things. Slide 38. The Federal Strategic Sourcing Initiative was launched in partnership with GSA, and thus far is focused on 3 commodity types: office supplies, domestic delivery, and wireless. We have seen some impact. About $340 million were spent through these vehicles at a savings of $60 million, 15%. Remember, in the example on the prior page, I said if we just save 2% on the pie, we save $10 billion. They save 15% through these 3 categories thus far. And then there are other agencies that are doing.
Can I stop you there, Joe?
Of course.
So have you consolidated the wireless purchasing, or what? So how'd you realize this benefit?
Yeah. So 2 things on wireless. One, there's a solicitation, kind of at the end of the process, coming out next month in May for. Or I guess a month and a couple days, for wireless, where we're going to do just that, consolidate. But certain agencies have done it. So USDA saved $20 million. They had, and I had the number, I forget what they did with them, but they had basically 3,000 contracts. And you've heard a lot today, judging by what Jeff said about some of the fractured nature of their field operations. They had 3,000 contracts with wireless carriers. They narrowed those down to 100 contracts with 3 carriers and have saved tens of millions of dollars. So there have been some one-off agencies.
USDA.
That's just USDA.
Yeah, so my point is.
But the government-wide wireless will be going out in May.
So that's an initiative.
So the realized savings are through office supplies, and then UPS, which was the domestic delivery winner. And then there are some behavioral management components as well. Strategic sourcing is not bulk buying, it is strategic sourcing. So there's the vendor management component, which is this aspect, but then there's a demand management component as well. You had, for example, with all the federal agencies here in DC, you had a lot of people doing priority overnight to Richmond. Well, if you do priority overnight to Richmond, or you do, truck, it's going on the truck. There is no air service. It's just going to get there the next day. But the price variation is huge. So there was a big opportunity around, just changing behaviors that way. And one of the things that attracted me to this, I did this in the private sector a few times, and those demand management pieces are huge. We went around one of our clients at the end of the project and literally physically replaced all of the priority overnight envelopes and put those in a centralized location with the 2-day shipping and saved millions of dollars. You extrapolate that, again, over the largest spend base there is, huge opportunity. And that individual agency thing, again, has proven some successes, but is ripe for, to your point, a broader initiative. But, okay, so the last page, 39, why can we use your help and your good thinking? This sounds like a no-brainer. Great. We all agree, go do it. Because there are some real challenges. You've got, as we saw on the first page, a real decentralized structure for purchasing. It's got a bunch of rules, but it's controlled at the agency. Agencies like that. They have the control. They have the ability to make their decision. There's the flexibility to get what they need to deliver on their mission. But there's a huge loss of control to play by those rules. Where's the right balance there? I think that the best examples certainly are in the private sector, and we would really benefit from kind of having folks weigh in on exactly how to do this. It's not as simple. It's not a binary choice. And I don't think anybody's cracked the code in the government on where in the scale we should be. Secondly, how do we get the folks who are doing this? We've got a 36,000 person strong contracting officer cadre. but we don't have the same incentives there as we would have in a private sector context where say, hey, you cut some better contracts, lower by X%, you're going to get this kind of bonus, you're going to get this kind of promotion. Those aren't the incentives that they're working for. So how do we tie it into a broader mission, maybe a share in savings type of thing? I don't know, but are there other opportunities to align the individual incentives with the organizational incentives that maybe you guys have seen? Lastly, or two more quick things, leveraging the spend base is where that bulk purchasing thing comes in, but doing it in a way that creates a win-win. So not just, aha, we've now got all of our agencies on the same contract and we're going to beat up a vendor for better pricing. Sure, that's part of it. But if we really want to do this in a sustainable way, it's got to be a win-win for both. So building longer-term relationships, building incentives for both sides of the equation, and clearly as people who, many of you sell to the government, would have great input on how to do that. Jeff mentioned that I've been at the Small Business Administration for the last 3 years, and if there's one thing that I've learned in working on the government contracting for the small businesses is you can't approach this, no matter what the rules or regs are, you can't approach this as an adversarial way. Hey, you have to do that because it says here you have to do that. You have to approach it in a collaborative way. You have to define it as a win-win if you really want the sustainable structural changes, which is what we'd be looking for here. And then lastly, driving that increased price transparency so we can really benchmark what best prices are, understand what, if I come into this saying, I want the entire federal government to pay one price for a commodity, and that should be less than or equal to the lowest price anybody's paying now. I think that's a reasonable statement, but there are also other externalities as to why that may not be achievable, and we need to understand what is a real reason for that and what is something so we're saying. So I apologize for talking so quickly, but I know my time was short.
What is so when I look at GSA,
Yeah.
so somebody tell me, why isn't more consolidated around what GSA does? Maybe I just don't understand how it works.
I think there are areas in which,
It's optional?
yeah, it is. That's a big part of it. But there's also it's somewhat of a myth that they offer the best pricing all the time. They do sometimes, and it used to be this most favored nation pricing structure. That's not universally how it is now. So you have agencies who say, okay, here's what the GSA schedule sells plastic water bottles for. If I go to the source, I can cut a better deal directly with them. And so it's counterintuitive.
That's counterintuitive.
But that's why there needs to be a slight reinvention of the wheel here on what that was trying to do. And that's exactly right. Now, part of it is because I'm getting onto the GSA schedule without any volume guarantee or any understanding who's going to be buying and how many. So I'm not necessarily setting my pricing where I would if you came to me and said, I'll buy 4 million bottles and I'll work it so that the delivery schedule works for your production schedule. We're going to have a mutually agreeable term and we can drive a lot of costs out of the system. It doesn't work that way. I'm just saying, hey, when I come to you to buy water bottles, how much will you charge me? And know how many am I buying, when am I buying, how am I buying?
So it sounds like, though, there's a two-step process. First, you got to be on the list of suppliers. And then second, each year you true up how much volume you're doing and get better pricing. I don't know. It seems like it sounds like you've already got some things in place that we should look at.
Absolutely. And GSA is what we call executive agent for the initiatives we've done thus far, although we're talking to other agents. The question is then where do we get the wide open, anybody can play, which hurts the volume guarantee per vendor, versus making it narrower so that I can better gauge and guarantee volume, therefore drive better discounts. There are trade-offs on both sides.
Something to just think about. Some of this could be so radical that I think we're going to need to think through how to get your suppliers and vendors a soft landing.
Right.
Because
Right.
you're going to have job creation issues if you're not careful. I mean, if you just strike like that and you drive hundreds of millions of dollars out of the U.S. economy because the suppliers are. I mean, there's got to be.
Don't worry. We'll be okay. We'll be okay because we'll either return it back to the private to the people who paid the money.
Consumers, and they'll
the people who
eventually
paid
buy
the money.
more of
'Cause
your
at the end of
stuff.
the, at the end- at the end of the day, right? It's a balance, right? The money that is spent, that 120 billion or the 500 billion, it's coming out of the IRS. It's coming out of revenues to the government. So So if the government had a surplus, that'd solve a whole different set of problems.
No, I mean, sign me up. It
Gail,
just-
I will
it's-
say though, you know,
I'm sitting here thinking I'm going to short HP because of their printers. Definitely, definitely shorting FedEx. I mean, they're just totally off
you
my
know, one of the
list.
things that really
Remember,
resonate.
we're on camera right now.
Just one question I have is, what are you guys looking
all right.
for the PMAB to do? I mean, you've described the problem, and you've got some of the solutions or things that you're working on. What do you want from us on this?
So-
Not just you, on all three projects.
For this, I would put it, you know, I can get as granular as helpful, but really in the broad category of there are private sector best practices. These are not new problems
For
writ
sourcing.
large. Yeah, I think it's probably true for a lot of these things like Office of the Future and some of the other issues, but certainly in my little piece of the world, I know for a fact that in many contexts, the private sector has cracked the code on this, but it's not just as simple as reading a research paper and then applying those. I need to have a back and forth with some of your teams to say, okay, how
How'd
did
you
you do
get
this?
there?
How did, exactly. So we pick that line, and I think that will be incredibly helpful.
Yeah, if we look back on what I think was successful with the topics from last year, it was, you know, keeping a focus on what are the process best practices and what are the leadership qualities and strategies that are needed from your perspective.
Well, I think what you're describing here is a very, not on this scale, obviously, but not an uncommon phenomenon even in the private sector, where a lot of people will claim that procurement decisions need to be decentralized because the specific item they're buying is somehow strategic and specific. You'd be amazed at how important paperclip decisions might be for some decentralized function. So I do think there's probably a lot of experience around the table dealing with these cultural issues, and I think your instinct, Joe, is right that, you know, it's nice to say there's going to be a mandate, but unless it's bought in culturally, unless people see the benefits, they're always going to think that their local purchasing decision is faster, better, cheaper than some centralized procurement authority. And so you have that inherent battle. I mean, it's the same issue with real estate. A lot of these things we're talking about is that inherent federalism issue we saw in the IT thing. So I do think the people around this table probably had a lot of experience around this issue.
They're all three great projects.
They
A lot
are.
of money.
And we feel your pain.
Well, so, and I take it, Steve, in our next meeting, we're going to be asked to pick 2 out of the 3 to focus on?
Yeah, so I think Jeff's suggestion was we reconvene the group by phone in a week or two, so you had a chance to chew on these a little bit and to ask more questions about how could PMAB actually play into these, and pick 2 of the 3. You know, if you're willing to go with 3, we're always happy to get your help, but I think 2 we found is a pretty manageable number for this group.
Great.
Thank
set
you,
of
Joe and
issues.
Peter, Danny.
Good job, guys.
Thank
Good luck.
you.